Welcome to Season 3 of the Chai Break podcast. We're excited to engage in more inspiring Chaiversations around our cross-cultural experiences.
This season, we're diving deep into an often grey area and a taboo in our culture, mental health and well-being. So, join us on our mission to break the barriers and get comfortable in those often uncomfortable spaces. Hello. Welcome to the Chai Break podcast. Hi, Rama.
Hi, Shweta. How's it going?
It's going good. It must be freezing there, right?
It's crazy.
Been so cold here.
It's crazy. I don't know. I mean, I'm in Cleveland, if the audience have not heard about the transition. But it is freezing here. I tried to take my dogs for a walk just now before this podcast recording, and I just fell right on my back, flat on the floor in the snow.
Oh my God.
Slipped on ice, and I think I'm fine. I'll know tomorrow if something really has changed. So it's freezing. Yes, Cleveland is freezing, people.
New York is freezing too.
Wow. Yeah. But it's all good. And because, this episode makes it worth it all. So our guest for today's episode is someone who's forging a unique path, bringing her passion for mental health and movement together, something that is just so beautiful, like combining mental health and well-being and dance. So we're going to talk a lot about it. Let's welcome Dr. Monica Shah. And before we dive in today's Chaiversation, I'm going to say a little bit about Dr. Shah. Dr. Monica Shah is a licensed psychologist and certified school psychologist based in Manhattan. She specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, and rational-emotive behavioral therapy. And we'll talk a little bit about those for individuals across any age range, families, couples, and groups. Dr. Shah brings these evidence-based practices to schools and communities through workshops and writing, serving a mission to increase access to mental health care. She's also actively engaged in advocacy efforts to increase equity in her field, and she is committed to serving underrepresented groups and targeting systems-level issues. Dr. Shah's research and clinical interests include the use of mindfulness with special populations and acceptance-based cognitive behavioral therapies. Dr. Shah is also a part-time professional dance artist. That's so amazing. And we're going to talk about that too. And she performs with classical and contemporary Indian styles. She is trained in Bharatanatyam for over 30 years with complementary work in diverse movement forms and has performed as both a soloist and guest artist in dance productions across Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Ottawa, and New York. Dr. Shah is currently creating dance work to highlight and normalize mental health issues and is involved in initiatives that use the arts in healthcare to promote social justice. This is just so fabulous, Monica. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I am just so delighted to, as I'm reading your bio, I'm getting goosebumps because you're doing something that's so fascinating. You're combining like mental health and well-being and dance forms, and you're professional at both these aspects. And I truly think that movement is so fundamental for mental health well-being. And I've been trained in Bharatanatyam as well. This was many moons ago. So for me, it almost feels like through this conversation, I'm going to vicariously live that this dance side of me. So this is wonderful, and welcome to our show.
Yeah, in fact, this actually, Monica, takes me back all the way to the time, me and you met. So for our listeners, we actually met at our common NYC dance group. It's a Bharatanatyam meetup group that we met at. And I remember us briefly, talking, and I knew what Monica did. And so when we were, crafting our season 3, I was like, wait a second, I thought she did something to do with mental health. So yeah, it's so exciting to have you here, Monica, and get to know you on the professional side, after interacting with you on the dance side of things.
Mm-hmm, that's right. No, I'm very excited to be here. I was so happy when we connected and started talking about this. So thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. So before we dive in, to the meat of this episode and all of that, we'd love to learn about your path to choosing your career and the influences and inspirations surrounding it, and what really drew you towards, becoming a psychologist.
Yeah, I mean, my path was a bit of a winding one. I really didn't always know what I wanted to do. I applied to my undergrad as an undecided major, and I remember taking my first year psychology class and loving it. Like I just found it fascinating, learning about people, human behavior, kind of the way that we work.
Yeah.
And so that was like my first kind of, interest.
Mm-hmm.
I also, had danced since I was little, and I was in a dance company in Toronto throughout undergrad. And so that was always a very big part of my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Another influence actually was my mom is a teacher. And so I had always been around, education, and I'd done a lot of volunteer work in her schools. And I always worked with the kids that were struggling with learning or behavior. And that was the work that I really, really loved.
Mm-hmm.
So I first did my master's in school psychology, which was really bridging together psychology and education. And then I worked as a school psychologist for 5 years in British Columbia. And at the same time, I was building up kind of my solo work as a dance artist while I was there. And after doing that, I just felt like I wanted to move more into therapy and intervention. And so that's what brought me to New York to doing my doctorate here. And I loved just the process of learning during my doctorate, such a nerd. And just my dissertation was so interesting to me. I did it in mindfulness-based interventions for kids with autism in schools.
Wow.
And so it was just like bringing together like a lot of interests.
Mm-hmm.
So now I am doing therapy. So I'm a licensed psychologist. I do therapy, as you mentioned, with people across the age range, and then also families and couples and some group work. And I'm now kind of bringing mental health themes into my dance work as well. So that's been a really interesting process.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that. You have some exciting stuff that you just did.
Yeah. And I'm also just really passionate about just that increasing access to mental health.
Yeah, I think that's so critical.
Yeah.
Dance therapy seems to have such a great value. And I've been reading about that as well. And I know somebody else who's also doing that. It's so fascinating, trying to use movement and to affect mental health. You mentioned about your dissertation, and I'm you have another nerd in the scene here. So that's piqued my interest on that whole topic. So you mentioned about mindfulness in kids with autism. And, it's not just kids with autism. I think mindfulness in kids is such an important topic because I think we're looking at some mental health, almost like I would say an epidemic that's happening with kids these days. The younger and younger age groups are being heavily affected with mental health issues. And having a daughter of my own, having like 2 sons, and Shweta, I'm sure she has, she's dealing with her challenges.
Yes, definitely.
With Dia and stuff. So what are some of the advanced, I mean, I'm sure this is probably a question that should be asked later, but because we talked about mindfulness, what are some of these techniques? Are they being have the schools taken it into, adopting some of these mindfulness techniques? Or what are the obstacles or challenges that we seem to face in having schools adopt these techniques? Because I do hear a lot about it, and there's been a lot of talk about it, but we've never seemed to have found a routine or a practice that's being adopted in schools on this topic.
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. So, I mean, first off, it's being done in different schools, districts, like it's varied for sure, like with different levels of focus, consistency. Some schools are not doing that kind of work. And I think one of the main barriers, just having worked as a school psychologist, is schools and teachers and, educators, they're so overstretched, there's so much that they have to do. And so sometimes even if we know something will help, in the long run, having it be a sustainable practice in schools and kind of getting people on board, both, the frontline people, but also, the district people, it can be challenging because there's so many things that they have to balance. And that's, I think, the main challenge.
I see. Interesting, because I still remember there's a quote by Dalai Lama. I think he mentioned that if every kid is taught meditation before the age of 7, there would be no violence in the world.
Right.
So it really has a huge impact. Thank you so much for that question.
No, it's a very important skill for sure. And there are mindfulness-based curriculums out there. Where I trained, there's a program called Mind Up, and it's just really, there's a lot of really great resources out there. So that's actually part of the work that I'm trying to do as well, is getting to schools.
Yeah. So this very interesting thing I read on your website, and I quote, it said, "At one point, I felt completely lost. Societal expectations, decision anxiety, and fear of making a wrong move paralyzed me from moving forward on my path. Through releasing those chains and leading with curiosity, I build a life that fulfills me beyond my imagination." Just talk us through that time and those emotions that you went through.
Yeah. No, that was.
We're kind of switching roles here.
Okay.
Just kidding.
That was a tough time. And I see a lot of young adults coming in, my clients these days, with the same challenges, where it's like, what is the right move? What route is going to lead to things working out? And there's this kind of pressure that we put on ourselves to figure it out. And, we're so blessed to have all these different options available to us. Many of us are, some of us are not. But something that comes with that is this kind of, decision paralysis. So for me, part of my feeling lost was having these two areas, these two passions, dance and psychology. I couldn't see a way to have them both in my life. And I also had no idea where to start or how to create, the life that I wanted. And, on top of that, dance and psychology are both not common career paths for South Asian people.
Yes.
Right. So in retrospect, I was trying to figure this out on my own. And I remember going into the career center at the University of Toronto after graduating and just spending hours trying to research and figure out what I wanted to do and how to get there. So that was really challenging. Just it was scary to not know anything. So one of the things that helped me was deciding to just jump and start somewhere, right? So I didn't necessarily know that, school psychology was the thing for me, but I was interested enough in finding out. And then I also, with the dance side of things, I had gone to a dance residency in India, and that was really pivotal for me because I realized, oh my gosh, people can do this. You can do this, professionally. So, doing my master's first rather than going straight to a doctorate was a way to kind of balance, try to kind of build up dance while I was doing psychology. And so since then, I've really just been trying to lead with my interest, my curiosity in things. If I'm excited by an opportunity, I'm like, all right, let's apply, let's see what happens. And so that attitude helped me move from that fear more into that curiosity and interest, and listening to that, that instinctual feeling of just what feels right for you to do. So that was my process.
That's wonderful, because I think many people wouldn't, so many of us, I'm saying us because although we're all doing something professional wise, I think there's always this, what is the perfect, career fit? What is the perfect thing that we would do? We're always seeking something. I think trying to fulfill the perfection of doing a certain role.
And I don't think most people can like mix the two, mix both your your purpose, your passion, and bring it all together and like forge a path. So for people who can find that, I think it's such a blessing.
It is. That's the thing. I don't know if you really find that, but it's a process. I think you're always discovering even till the very end. I think you're just finessing the process.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it was actually a lot of hard work to, so it wasn't falling into it. It was jumping, seeing what happens, and then just like working and more opportunities come from that.
So, just growing up in a South Asian community that you have that is bound by expectations, like from family, society, and those of your own. Ran, you just said, you also said that, it's not the most common career choice for a South Asian woman going into this profession. So how does this kind of affect one's mental health?
Yeah, I mean, something that we talked about earlier in our conversations was this balancing of collectivist values and individualist values. Just as a little primer, collectivist values are very focused on family, community, group harmony.
Right.
And individualist values are very much more focused on the individual, autonomy, freedom, independence, right? Often many Asian-based cultures are seen as collectivist, and many kind of Western North American cultures are seen as individualist. So that can be just in itself, right, as a base, that creates a lot of different conflicts.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's especially for when people move to North America, and, my parents moved to Canada. This kind of goes for the US as well, that there's this idea of we want to come here for better opportunities for our family, for better opportunities. And within that, though, there's this different cultures that end up clashing that I don't know if that's always anticipated. So that can definitely bring up some different challenges. Like when you're kind of growing up within both cultures and exposed to both sets of those values. Yeah. And especially in adolescence, adolescence is a time where your peers become very important to you, and that really shapes identity development. It shapes who you're going to end up being in the world. And then your sense of developing your identity can conflict with that pull of cultural expectations, familial expectations, but then also you have this desire to fit in with your peers. And so that creates a lot of conflicts, as well as, academic expectations that might come up, expectations to, responsibility to your family, those kinds of things.
This is such a huge challenge, what you just mentioned, Monica, because I think that's one of the crux of our conversations as well with Shweta and I. And we are probably past the age of trying to identify what is it that we want to do in life. And although we're figuring out in a whole different way, but, education wise and stuff, we primarily did in India, and then we moved here. And we are, we've gone through this whole transformation process, living here for so many years. I've been here for more than 20 years, and almost practically this is my home. But then there have been this deep-seated cultural norms and expectations on how we grew up, and to get kind of change and to become who we are here. The same collectivist and individualist values still is, we've had to kind of try to
mix the two,
almost weave our way into the, between these two values, and ultimately realize, I like a little bit of this, I like a little bit of that, and this is who I am. It's like a mix of this, and this is what I choose to want to believe in. This is what I don't. I've been believing in it for 10 years. Now this is not my time. I don't do it. So we're literally in the same scenario, like you mentioned. But I can totally imagine somebody growing up here, and also
like our kids,
like our kids, they're going to grow up here, and we're exposing them to a lot of this collective views and trying to also give them the freedom to choose their individualistic values.
Right.
And I can see how our heads butt. And it is just an area where all of us, irrespective of age, are falling into.
Yeah. I mean, we moved and we were trying to figure it out. And then we had kids and then we were just like, oh, okay, now what? So it's just the whole process has just been like each year with every age, we're just like figuring it out. And,
It's almost like blind leading the blind sometimes, I would like to say that I know really well I figured it all out. And when I'm trying to raise the kids, I'm trying to figure it out with whatever little knowledge I have. I'm using those tools to help the kids. So I'm not saying it's like the perfect job, but the struggle is just a continuum. It just goes on.
That tension. It's so hard to hold because we can get caught between, what we want, what we feel our obligations are. And sometimes it's even hard to figure out what do I want, within that veil, what should I do? So it's a very difficult tension to hold.
And what about your family? How did what was the dynamic like? And, how did that work?
Yeah, I will say, I've been very lucky to have parents who have been supportive of me, what I want to do. And I realize not everybody has that privilege. But they moved to Canada. They actually met in Canada as well.
Okay.
And I was born in Toronto. And what I realized is they really were trying to have us have the experience of living in Canada as well as being connected to our Indian culture. So they were kind of exposing us to all these different things that, I remember going to, like library community events, teddy bear picnics, going on all these trips, like exploring the US, going to amusement parks, seasons passes. So we were just like really immersed in the culture that was in Canada. And we also had our culture, our Indian culture that we were exposed to at home. So I feel like within my family, I mean, even within that, there were some tensions, right? Growing up as an adolescent and, those things around like, oh no, you got to studies first, that's what you have to focus on, no dating, that kind of thing. So these kinds of things would definitely come up.
Wow. Yeah. So in our conversations, you were mentioning about, some research that your peers have done about risk and resilience factors specifically to South Asian populations. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes. Yeah. So, we've been talking about these different tensions that can come up when you're living between and within two cultures. So the pressures that could come up, familial or cultural, academic expectations. And so because of that, South Asian populations do have an increased level of stress potentially, which can then increase risk of mental health issues. There's some certain very specific pressures that could come up. As an example, so if you're in the LGBTQ plus community, and this is an identity that you are realizing and holding, it can be hard to potentially feel like you're not able to be your full self. And, that can come up in other contexts too. So there's a lot of these stressors that can increase risk for South Asian populations. And I'll just cite a statistic that Asian Americans as a whole, ages 15 to 24, they have been found to die from suicide more often than any other cause of death.
Wow.
Which is really, very sad. And South Asians in America, they do have a lower of suicide attempts and completed suicides compared to other Asian Americans. But, there are still these pressures and expectations that can lead to mental health symptoms, depression even. And then combine that with stigma around mental health, which can then make people avoid or delay getting treatment.
Yeah.
And that exacerbates the issue.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
that's a lot of the risk factors that can come up.
Yeah. I think in one of our early episodes, I was looking at some research and it actually said that the statistics for South Asian population that's available in regards to mental health, the numbers are so skewed because, like you said, thanks to the stigma surrounding it, people don't even go and seek therapy. So the access itself is kind of stunted because of, access itself is stunted. And then it's further, because of the stigmas that are associated with it. And do you still see that hesitancy in,
I mean, yeah, it's still there, definitely. But I will say that stigma seems to be lessening, or
I agree. Yeah.
especially, during and post-pandemic.
Yeah.
There are a lot more conversations around mental health that are happening. And so I think that's helping to decrease stigma.
And I think we were talking about this in another episode, I think in season 2, Shweta. This was about, how there's a lot more open conversations that's happening in mainstream media in South Asian community. There's open conversations that's happening, in the Bollywood circle. Like movies are being made with just this exact themes. And so it's not something that's a taboo topic, at least not in the main urban areas. And I think that's very encouraging. So two people can have a conversation and not feel being judged by the other person, which I think was the more common issues that we were facing. Still a lot of work has to be done, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
Exactly. And, you mentioned protective resilience factors as well. There are those within South Asian populations, just, that focus on the importance of community and family. That is a huge protective factor. At the same time that it can create certain pressures, it's also, the sense of belonging, that's a protective factor for suicide. So that's really important. Also, faith, people who have a believing in a certain faith, right? A lot of Indian people have that. South Asian people gives us a sense of higher purpose and meaning to life. So those are protective factors.
I think the more and more the families are becoming nuclear, I think that is where I think we're seeing a lot more of these mental health issues, right? So, it takes a village. And I think in India, there's a lot more of this. They used to be, I think, at least a lot more of this, the family, the extended family, the big family kind of taking care of one another. But I think we're getting a little bit more and more nuclear. And I think that's where we're seeing these mental health issues come up in much younger age groups where, like you just said, like faith is such an important thing, having some kind of,
anchor,
correct. Grounding. I think that's what we're kind of seeing less and less of that these days. And I think that's why probably there is a little bit more of that rise. But like you said, South Asian community is really a little bit still there, I think, with those anchors still largely in place. That's helping.
Yeah. And now to an exciting topic, something that, I connect with deeply. So, I was mentioning, we met through dance and all of that. Recently, you had a performance at the Tank in New York City as part of the International Human Rights Arts Festival called The Mosaic and Medicine. And I was reading on the website, it was described as a collection of pieces narrating lived, embodied experiences of how the body is judged, loved, recovers, and changes. So talk us through what this piece was, because it was centered around mental health and the process behind it.
Yeah. So that program was, I presented 2 pieces, and both were drawing from themes of mental health. And the first piece that I did, it was called In the Strength of Stillness. And it was really trying to create a feeling of mindfulness in people, in the audience. And so the piece was done mostly in silence. So increasing mindfulness, essentially, for those who may not know, is essentially helping your attention go to where you want it to go. And it is a self-regulation of attention. And so the piece was done mostly in silence and, with slow movements at times, even to encourage that sense of focus and also to have people sit in silence, to sit in the discomfort of silence and whatever that brings up, which is, that's a factor of mindfulness and meditation as well. So that was one of the pieces. And the second piece I did was a new piece that I just created this fall. And it's called Cognitions. So this one very much draws from my work in cognitive behavioral therapy. And it is a reflection of the different qualities of thoughts that we have that create our realities and can lead us to distress. Within cognitive behavioral therapy, the premise is that we all have different thoughts, feelings, behaviors, physical sensations, even that connect together and create our experience.
Right.
And so within our thoughts, we can create our own distress, right?
Right.
So the different qualities of thoughts that I did the piece with a cellist. We worked together, Emily Kendo, and she represented thoughts through her music. And we demonstrated, intrusive thoughts, cognitive distortions, racing thoughts, all of these things that can really create distress and struggle.
Yeah.
And the idea behind it, near the end is having those intrusions and distortions of our thoughts come up and allowing them to be there without letting them control you, what you do. And so continuing to, in the dance piece, move unaffected by, those thoughts. And continuing to move towards your goals despite what you're hearing in your head.
That's very interesting because I actually was watching, there's a documentary on mindfulness on Netflix, and I was watching that. And this is exactly actually how they described mindfulness, because everyone, when we first start meditating, especially, people are very, you think you need to have like a clear mind and you're meditating, but thoughts just keep coming. So the narrator in the documentary, he actually says, it's like you're sitting on the side of the highway and you're just watching these cars go by. You're watching the clouds go by. All of these are your thoughts, but you don't need to react, judge, do anything. Just watch them go by and, just be in what whether it's your breath or whatever it is, just stay right there and you can watch it go by. You don't have to stop it,
Exactly. One visual I really like is, and I use this in the piece, is almost like seeing your thoughts as like a movie reel, it's just kind of going by and you're seeing it go by. And just creating less attachment to our thoughts and less control, having them control us less.
Observing, being the observer of thoughts.
Yeah.
Exactly, being an observer.
Yeah. Because it takes me back because I could not meditate for the longest time because of that. Because I'd be like, shh, why are you thinking? Why? I would try to shush my thoughts. And the more you do that, the more thoughts just keep coming.
Exactly. And, exactly like you said, the goal is not to empty our minds. Like that's impossible. We're human, we have thoughts. But it's more to change the relationship that we have with our thoughts and create a little bit more distance, and we can choose to follow the ones that serve us and our goals and our values. And we can choose to, distance from the ones that don't. Yeah. But of course, that's a process.
Yeah.
It's a lifelong process, for sure.
Okay, so before we end the show, Dr. Shah, would you like to share where people can get in touch with you and your website and details? And we'll add all of that to our show notes as well.
Sure. So my website is drmonicashah.com, DRMONICASHAH. And then Instagram, I'm at Monshah Dance. So that's where you can find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this amazing Chaiversation. We just learned so much, and it's just beautiful. And kudos to all the work you're doing. And I hope you find more, mediums to kind of bring mental health and movement together. And I hope I get to catch your show soon.
Yes.
Next time for sure.
Yes, there will be some this year. So I'll keep you posted.
Yeah.
This is so exciting. And I learned so much from just this conversation, Monica. So inspiring, I would like to say, and at the same time, quite informative. So thank you so much for being a guest on our show.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much, for real.
Until next time, everyone, we'll see you in another episode. So bye.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed our Chaiversation as much as we did. Please let us know what you think. It means the world to us.
Yes, and join the Chaiversation on our social media channels, where we discuss the many facets of mental health and well-being and share our collective thoughts. If there's a topic you'd like us to talk about, write to us at chaibreakpodcast@gmail.com or DM us on our Instagram account.